Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Psychology and Spirituality Bridge to Better Life discussion. During our weekly episode, we explore this intersection between spirituality and psychology. And with our discussions, we capture many times those timeless pearls of wisdom that both fields, spirituality and psychology, come and give to us. My name is Marcia Trajano. I'm your host today, and with me are Dr. Anahy Fonseca and Jussara Korngold. Anahy, you have recently went through the loss of your mother, and I'd like to ask permission for us to today to explore this very difficult theme together. In 1969, the book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross on death and dying fundamentally shifted how society as a whole, but also the entire, and we're talking about here Western, right? The Western healthcare system started to view death, grief, and even the process of dying. She, in her books and her research, challenged the medical community to approach the dying with compassion, to acknowledge the emotional and psychological aspects of death, and to recognize the importance of spiritual care. It is also important for us to know that on the other side of that equation, the book by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross gave us, those of us who are grieving, a framework to understand, to validate our experience, and somehow to teach us that grief is a complex but very much personal experience and not bound by a linear timelines. In other words, we don't feel grief the same, but in terms of time, but we feel grief similar in the curve of our emotions. It's good to understand that her legacy today continues since 1969, right? But it continues in practice such as hospice care, palliative medicine, and grief counseling. And the focus is always on let's treat the whole person, mind, body, and spirit through this inevitable, fatal process that we all of us are going to go through, which is the death of a physical body. If we flip a little bit, we can see that Spiritism, and for those of you who do not know what Spiritism is, it's this body of work. It is a belief system, it's a philosophy, a religion as well, that was brought to us by Allan Kardec in the 19th century, has this very distinctive and consoling aspect when it talks about death, dying, grief, and loss. Spiritism draws heavily from that central, that core idea that life is a continuous element that goes beyond the physical realm, the material realm, and the soul or the spirit is really immortal. Pause here. We don't ever die. We live. We don't have a death, but the physical body ceases to exist in one experience, one corporeal existence. But anyways, according to Spiritism, death is not an end, but a transition from this material realm, the material world, to a spiritual one. If I keep going further, Joanna de Angelis has also made significant contributions to the discussion on spiritual and psychological understanding of death and dying. And her work explores themes of spiritual growth, right? And brings that, again, the notion of reincarnation and the process of death from that spiritist perspective. So I propose that we can spend a few minutes together and we talk about maybe some of the thoughts that come to our minds in this topic of death and dying. And perhaps we can go beyond that, which is let's talk about Joanna, what she taught us about death, but also the power of love. Jussara, can I ask you first? Can you perhaps tell those who are here with us today some of the key ideas and why we say that Spiritism is the promised consoler, which is right here, right now, what we're talking about, the consoling aspect of us understanding death and dying?
Thank you, Marcia. So, hello, everyone. Anahy, it's great to have you here and to do this work that I think it's so important for each and every one of us, and to talk about difficult subjects because, according to statistics, that there's nothing more difficult thing for us to talk about, or where our fears rest than when we have to deal and talk about death.
Mhm,
And when you were, giving us some of the main ideas about the passing, the dying from the spiritual perspective, it's important for us to highlight, to emphasize that, as a spiritual person, as a spiritist, we will never undermine the the process, the pain, the suffering that we are going to go through. And I think the way that Dr. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she puts the five stages of griefs, she put it there, that that is not necessarily just after the loss, but I think even the one that is through the process of dying go through that. It cannot be possible that my time has arrived. It passed by so fast, and then you feel angry because you don't want to accept that. And
mhm,
at the same time, then I don't know if there is a higher force in the universe, but if you're there, I'm not ready yet, give me more time. So we start the bargaining. And of course, we are not going to be in it. If this is the process really that you have to go through, you're not going to be receiving that response that you were expecting.
mhm,
And then comes the depression, until it comes to a point that you can see that your whole
mhm,
self is deteriorating for one
mhm,
reason or another. And
mhm,
I think it's very good. And we even mentioned in terms of spiritism, sometimes how much more beneficial it is for the one that is actually going through the process of die, to go through this process than having a sudden death. But I think this is are things that we learn from the spiritual perspective, that we will find in many philosophies, not only in spiritism, especially all the philosophies that bring to us as well this idea of immortality and reincarnation.
mhm.
And then, by knowing that, again, it's not that the pain is not going to exist, but at least we know that is not the end. It's not the end for us. It's not the end of our relationships. It's not the end of love
Yeah.
and participating. So I think there
Can
is
I?
so much for us to consider in this point.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I wanted just to just a little bit longer, Josara, you mentioned, of course, the five stages of grief, right? Just to everybody, five stage. Number one, denial. Number two, anger. Number three, bargaining. Number four, depression. Number five, acceptance. And those five stages go on both ends. That person that is undergoing, right, the change, the final steps before moving on, passing on. But those of us who stay behind, right, and it's
Mhm.
a why do I say it's important in my viewpoint here, Jussara and Anahy, is the fact that it's also important for those who are around those who are grieving to be aware of that curve, right?
Yeah.
And by being aware, I mean, pay attention with the brain, right? Oh, it maybe, let's pretend, right? Maybe it's denial, or maybe that anger is okay, right? I can see that person is so angry, but it's okay because it's part of the curve, so on and so forth. But it's also important, super important to be with that person with your heart, to understand, to accept. And even if you don't physically hug that person going through all of that upheaval, the roller coaster of emotions, as we say it, but that person feels loved and feels welcomed, embraced, if you will.
It's very important what you said, Marcia, because uh, being from on the outside, we have to have this understanding about the emotions, and I think this is where we see really the bridge between, this understanding of the spirituality and psychology that talks
Mhm.
about our emotions. But I would love to hear from Anahy now, and
Yes.
what she can share with us, and the way that all this knowledge and understand um, helped her to go through and to cope with the whole situation.
Anaí?
So, well, thank you for being here with me and everybody that is listening to this podcast, because it's out of space and time. What we are talking, it's an archetypal fact of life, right? Because we born and we die and we reborn again. So, as the spiritist knowledge tells us, and it's great that you lots of synchronicities that you talk about on Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. That I'm not going to say the exact year because then everybody is going to understand my age. But I was a senior at Western High School in the United States, and in social science class, for the first time, I had no idea. The teacher gave us On Death and Dying by Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. So, and it was great. Of course, as teenagers, it opens, and I do think that at least in high school, everybody should have basic concepts of psychology, because we have to really start learning about ourselves from an early age. But when I was listening to you guys, because it's the beautiful work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross brought to psychiatry and psychology, this knowledge of the process, the psychological process of dying, right? For us to understand, as Marcia said and Jussara, it's okay to have all these feelings and to have rage, denial, and all that she described by examining patients who were dying. It's not that she was, and it was not a philosophical thing. It was not questioning. She was observing as a psychiatrist, as a medical doctor, uh, her patients in the process of dying, and describing what we are saying, what she was looking at, and what she was realizing. And it's the same scientific method, we are not going to talk about this today, that Allan Kardec used to bring forth all the spiritist knowledge. We know that as medical people that are also spiritists. But what I wanted to tell you is that when I was listening to you, I also, I was reminded that she was describing the ego in this process. From what I understand, of course, she had a connection about how important, and what I remember that I read about herself also is that she was connecting to the spirituality from the very beginning of bringing together spirituality and medical knowledge. But we had Freud in 1917 that wrote a book or an essay, I think it was about mourning and melancholy. And Freud already talked a lot about the reactions of the ego when we are in the process of mourning, but not so much when we are dying. So Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, she opened she looked at the person who was dying. And then we would say, well, but Freud he was a neurologist, and then he became interested and developed all the psychoanalysis. But he had a good heart. He wanted to, diminish people's suffering. But he was looking at the psychological part of the thing, and the pathology, let's say, the ego reactions that are not exactly, he considers a normal, of course, it's a normal way of reacting to the fear of death and to the process of dying. But he was always worried about, I say, with what makes us ill and how we can alleviate symptoms. That's the pathology that I'm talking about. In this sense, can we diagnose, is this okay, or is this normal in this sense? And I think Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, when she was looking at the patient, she was not worried about that. She really connected to the human being and to the reactions, not trying to classify if this is okay, this is something that we should worry about. She was just describing what she was with her heart and mind. And well, so saying this, it helped me a lot in my professional life, but it was not enough. It was not enough for me, and I think it's not enough for psychiatrists, psychologists, a lot of medical people from, for instance, colleagues from palliative care, the specialization in medicine, where we help the person to die without feeling so much pain and so much discomfort, because the person is in the process of dying. It's not it's irreversible. You cannot bring health. And so when the doctors understand that, there's this specialization that it's palliative care, that you help the person to have the best possible condition without so much suffering in the physical body.
Can
But
I
they,
can I just can I
yes,
just add a few moments? It's important here for us to understand again her work, end of 1960s, right? And I just wanted to add here for everyone who doesn't know from a historical perspective, but she, Kubler-Ross, is often credited with bringing the foundation on modern hospice and palliative care movement. So before
yeah,
that, it's important for us to understand, because what you're saying is indeed right. She's working with the ego, right? It's the personality in this life, this incarnation. But why is it important for us to know this? It's because her work before then, medical care, the medical community, and this is again in the West, um, if they were dealing with end of life care, they primarily focused on what is the disease, right? What is the disease so that I can cure the disease. And the other objective of a doctor, medical doctor, was to prolong life at all costs, right? It doesn't matter that this person is maybe uncomfortable, suffering pain, or even not well. So if you flip that to, I think, what you're talking here on hospice and palliative care, it's the opposite. It's
Yeah.
understanding now that those that are undergoing end of life care, it's the entire community of caretakers focusing on comfort, focusing on dignity, focusing on support, not only the patient, but the entire family, on understanding that that quality of life, the remaining life, is more important than just keep prolonging life forever, but there's no quality in there. Thank you,
Yeah.
Anahy.
And yeah, you're totally right, and it's nice that you could clarify that point. But what I have seen, at least here, well, palliative care, so unit, let's say, and doctors, they are open up to spirituality. They call us, for instance, the psychiatrists that have knowledge about spirituality, for, seminars and things like that. But to this day, I'm sorry to say that some are not still open to, and this is so precious that the doctors, should be open to spirituality, and the patients also spirituality, because it's basic, right? Help. So it's we are connecting. They call us, but we need more of, understanding. And from my point of view, it's not because I'm a spiritist, but I think we need more spiritism and spiritual knowledge in medicine. You guys know that I try to bring and to research and to bring to my colleagues, and to help in the research about the interconnections of medicine and spirituality, because it's so urgent. We understand, doctors and patients understand, and feel free to talk about that. So what happened to me, that I know that everybody wants to understand, and you asked me, and I'm very thankful that I can talk here to people, if I can be of help, my experience with my mother, that it's very, very recent in this recording, is that everything that we have been talking about the works of Joanna de Angelis, that brings the depth psychology, using a lot of, but not only, a lot of Jung, of what we call depth psychology, or analytical psychology, like concepts of the self that we sometimes here in the podcast we call the higher self, just to make clear, a little clearer to people. But she talks about, so, the ego being able to talk with the self, and I'm going to explain why this is so important in the practice in day by day life. And about, we have talked about expansion of consciousness, synchronicities, and a lot of stuff that Joanna uses to connect with spiritist knowledge, about what Marcia and Jussara were talking of, many lives, the continuation of our consciousness, not only connected to the physical body, that it's a knowledge that spiritism brings to us. So what happens, that when we start studying, the writings, beautiful books by Joanna de Angelis and Divaldo Pereira Franco, we want to learn We are in our minds trying to understand. And this is very important because the mind is very important. It's going to decipher, to be curious about things. But of course, the mind is very connected, right, to the ego. And for many psychiatrists and psychologists, kind of the same thing. But Joanna uses Jung and other authors and even other cultures like Buddhism, Hinduism, and she talks about in different of her books, that we are all connected actually with the self, as Jung, she agrees with Jung, that this consciousness, higher consciousness, deep in the unconscious, not our ego, the consciousness of this day by day life, and the personality, the center of the personality, conscious personality, but that this consciousness, in the words of Joanna, is our spirit, the way that our spirit manifests here, and that it's a totality of the psyche also at the same time, because of course our spirit is not up there at somewhere, and we are, no, it is the basic stuff, all right, that the here we are in a soul that it's connected to the physical body, but it's the basic let's say intelligence, the basic experience that encompasses everything that the spirit has lived, has learned, has felt, right? So this is kind of wow, but that's so we have two consciousness, yes, and Jung and Joanna says we have more than two because we have our complexes connected to the ego. So we are very complex ourselves, right? But of course, this is all the mind. Then we come and we study a lot of Joanna, we talk a lot, and we love all this knowledge. We are curious as spiritual children, we should say. And it's okay because we should say, Jesus tells us, come to me, all the children, right? And we want to be the ones that come to him, right? And that are with him and that feel him inside of us. He is our model, as Joanna says, of the integral human being that we achieve to get in this life. But the thing is that, okay, then I am with someone that so it is part of all of our experience in this life, mothers and fathers, for instance. Okay, we can talk about a child, we have talked about our sons and daughters, we have talked in another episode. But since I am with this experience, from some days ago, that we have even if our father and mother, it's okay because they are old. Sometimes they have not only different diseases, but they have like dementia, different types of dementia. And we know that they are going to die. Even, of course, we don't want, because we want them. We want their smell, we want their touch. We want their closeness. We want, the hug, the kisses. Brazilians hug and kiss a lot. Everybody knows that. Other parts of the world, maybe not so much, not so much, but anyway, the feeling is there and it's there. They are with us our whole lives. They are the way that we come to this life. And then they are dying. But we know that they are dying because they are very old. My mother was 94 years old. And she had a kind of dementia, so we, from the last 2 years, and we knew that, that she was going, of course, to pass away at some point. And she had spiritist knowledge, and I have Buddhist people also in my family. Most of them are spiritists, but we have Buddhist and other, other philosophical approach. And so we think you are prepared. But then something happens that you know the person is suffering. Okay, nobody wants the person that we love to suffer, and we don't want to watch them. And we think that, oh, we have a palliative care doctor, but some things that we are not, we don't have to talk about that now. But what happened is that at the very end, things didn't work as they should in terms of palliative care and of, not suffering and all that. And for some reason, in her last hours, I was the person that was with her. And she was suffering. And she was looking straight at me. And I knew eye to eye, the eyes are the windows of the soul. If we connect to the eyes, you can see the person's soul, feelings, what the person is trying to tell you and cannot tell you. And I knew that. I knew it was an intuition because, of course, our higher self, our spirit knows things that the ego doesn't know. You are carrying the ego, you are carrying your complexes with you in these moments, as it's so important what Marsha and Jussara were talking about. And understanding. And on psychiatry, I have read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I have read everything and studied everything. I have been in seminars, the palliative care unit, but it was my mother. So at that moment, you are not all the titles, everything that you have studied. I couldn't remember anything of this stuff. Actually, I think I'm here with friends and my big family, that is our spiritual family, that are people that are listening to this podcast. Doesn't matter when they are going to be listening. We are a spiritual family here. So what happens is that I forgot all of that. And the first thing that I thought when I was arriving at her bedroom, my first thought was for Jesus. And I asked him, Christ, give me strength. So I didn't expand, but talking to you now, I know that my higher self was in command in that moment, asking for the ego to step down. I don't want to think about the stages of dying. I don't want to, because I didn't think anyways, but I don't want any of my psychiatric practice or whatever. I wanted Jesus to give me strength to do the will of my mother's higher self, because we have to respect the person who is dying. The ego is suffering, but the self is always there from birth to the end and beyond, because Joanna tells is our spirit. So if she needed that time, she needed that suffering. She needed that. If I was the person, because of synchronicities, that was chosen to be there, I must feel grateful. Even if my medical practice was a little angry with the palliative care colleagues and whatever, and maybe with other people, we have families and people get stressed, and it's all, everybody knows how it is this time. We can get resentful or angry, and it's okay, as Marsha and Jussara were saying, because it's okay, it's normal, it's human. We are human beings going through a very different difficult experience. So what happens that my first thought, because of everything that we have talked about, because all the readings of Joanna, all the readings about spiritism, and it was very spontaneous. I never thought about that. I just thought about Jesus and asked him to be with me and give me strength. And when I was there and I understood that she was suffering, and I'll tell you, if somebody feels upset, just, can close a little bit our podcast and come back when, but I think some things I don't have to tell you so that you can understand how I felt. She was crying because she was in pain. And I had, I'm kind of the second youngest child. She had seven. I have six brothers and sisters. I'm the, and so I'm the second youngest. So I had to, clean her tears and hold her hand. And then I used the title of this episode, How Much Light, that it's a beautiful, beautiful meditation, prayer, everything together. That when we call the light from above and we call the light of Christ to help us, and we at the same time expand our consciousness, our spirit, we ask that our spirit can be in front of Jesus, our Christ, and that we can connect to him. So his presence is really strong at that moment. You can feel the light. You can, I'm not a medium that I can see things. I'm only once in a while, and I have a lot of intuition. But at that moment, when the ego, as Jung said, when the ego diminished and it kind of calms down, then the self can manifest. And Joanna says that. And then you have a strength that is archetypal. It's very ancient in our souls. And it's this archetypal strength, and it connects you with the source, the creator. And with the spiritist colleagues that were there, the in spirit also, or from other dimensions, that from other whatever, because even the spiritist knowledge freezes our minds and bodies, right? So we can, it's universal. So it doesn't matter even the religion that the person had or whatever. So what I want to tell you is that I think Joanna asked me, and I'm very grateful that I can be here among friends and my spiritual family, that you are all, to give a testimony, I think. And I love this, remember the book, but it's a testimony of light. It's not the light that comes from me, because we are light beings, right? And the light is inside all of us, because we are sons and daughters, and we are brothers and sisters that come from the same source of light, our creator, same source of light and love. So if our self manifests, if we can understand the suffering, and we can calm our egos. I know that it's very difficult because I have been in this position, but Joanna helped me so much, because I could feel that she and other mentors and guides, and that I could not name because it didn't even matter, because I know we can feel that they are, because I could hold the hands of my mother, who wouldn't let go, for 4 to 5 hours, singing almost without singing. With we have this meditation in my mobile, and I sang together. If I stopped, she would open her eyes, and I would know that I had to go on singing for her, because I knew I was bringing and helping her to expand her consciousness. And I knew at that moment she was afraid. I could see in her eyes. So I knew that I was trying to help her to talk, in a sense, with her higher self, with herself, and to diminish the fear, the insecurity of the ego, because If our body is feeling pain, people, the ego is connected to it. It's the way that it's from birth, connects to the body and to, to our senses, right? And to the world outside. And so after the first, I was thinking that she had medicine for the pain, but since the pain wouldn't lessen and wouldn't, and since she was looking at me, only she would close her eyes only when she there was all this intensity of how much light and prayers. Um, so the caritas, I don't know if there's a translation to English, the prayer, and the beautiful, beautiful song, Our Mother by Gounod, that we call in Portuguese Ave Maria. So all these resources to connect us to the source, to keep our, as much as the suffer would last, to keep us connected to the Christ, because he said he would be with us until what we call the end, but we know that never ends, but the end maybe of this experience. So I wanted to tell you that it was so important because I knew I could help her. I felt in my heart that, and I was very, very grateful. Joanna has a book about gratitude that we have talked about so many times, about love, a whole book about love, a whole book about gratitude, power of gratitude, that it's love in action. And when I was feeling tired at some point, I would ask again, I would tell to myself that it was the higher self. I'm very grateful to be the one to be here with her. Very, very grateful. And I'm very grateful for all this love that it's here. And so I was very worried, maybe Jussara could talk to us a little bit, that in the beginning, that I would do the right thing and don't be in the middle of the spirits that were there disconnecting mother, or helping the you know so Jussara, if you could tell a little bit from the spiritist knowledge in the very end, so that people can get comfortable. I can tell you that maybe they told me, I can, my ego was not there paying so much attention, but I knew in my heart that I was doing the same thing, the right thing, and that I was praying, helping mother, connecting through the eye and our hearts, and that I was bringing how much light, trying to calm things down. And I was assured, I think, that I was not messing up with the spirits that were there trying to disconnect. But if Jussara could tell a little bit about that to people, I think it would be useful.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
Josiah, can I say something before you go on? Before you go on, if you don't mind, because not many people know this song, "How Much Light." It's a very small song, right, Anahy? But it is Brazilian, beautifully written. It's very soulful, but it is all about love, light, and hope. So just wanted everybody to know that, because when you're singing that your mom, you're bringing those elements of emotion to ensure that she felt that in the transition from one dimension to the next. Go ahead, Josada.
Yeah, when we were talking, and I was thinking about that, your sensation of, the presence of the spirits there. And according to what the spirits tell us, in the spiritist literature, there is as much happiness at the moment when we are born as when it's the moment of our passing. When we are born, the doctors have to cut the umbilical cord so that you can be released and live you a new life in a new body. And all the family, everyone, the mother, father are there to greet this child that came into the world, and the world of the incarnate, the one that had this physical body. But they say that the same way, when we are going through the process of, let's say, being born to the spirit life, is about the same. There is all this connection, this umbilical cord as well, that we know in many of the spiritualist philosophies, we call that the silver cord, which is the last one, the umbilical cord of the spirit, so to say, that the spirits will release as well. And so when we are before death, and when we are, when we have the blessings, I would say it is a blessing to be able to go through that, and have your loved ones next to you. The best thing we can do is that, to understand that there is a moment that we have to let them be released. And the song is very much about that. It's very much, when we put it's like very, you were talking about Buddhism, it's like reciting a mantra, right? Because you start saying how much light that is surrounding me, that is surrounding this place, that is surround everyone. And when you think about that, and when your emotions follow the words that you are pronouncing, that you are, or you are singing, it comes with all the energy, the release of energy that we have, that definitely is going to help in the process of the release of the spirit from the body, and the transition becomes so much easier and less painful, even at the point of releasing some of the pain that, like you're saying, at the last moment of last hours, the medication were no longer, you know, uh, affecting all the pain that she was feeling, but the being able to disconnect already, and being more in tune with the spiritual reality that was surrounding her in this case, makes the process so much easier. So in this sense, for everyone that is going through that, like we said before, we are not going to take for granted the possibilities of us being present and doing our part, especially here when we are talking about our parents, to whom we owe so much, we own our lives. But also to understand it is okay for us to cry, it is okay for us to suffer, it is okay to go through the 5 stages. But it's very important for us to always remember we are immortal spirits, and the love that unites us will never ever be gone. On the contrary, it's just going to grow.
Yeah, beautiful. I wanted to also maybe bring to us as we are closing, and thank you, Jussara. Thank you, Anahy, for sharing what you went through so recently. But Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, he says this is considered the love chapter of the Bible, right? And many people use his words in, say, wedding to celebrate love. But this is, as you mentioned, Josada, it is about the love that remains. It is not destroyed. So I would like to read it and ask Anahy for you to close our conversation today. So Paul says, love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always persevere. Anahy, do you want to maybe close our episode today and for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcia. And it's so important because the day of my mother passing was the day here in Brazil that we celebrate Paul of Tarsus.
Oh,
So it was a great synchronicity because I thought of this of his saying about love, and when we were with her in the last, saying our goodbyes, the whole family. So I talked about that because it was a beautiful synchronicity. And we know that synchronicity is the spirit manifesting itself and is the spirit connecting, the spirit with capital S,
uh-huh.
connecting all of us, all our spirits, let's say. And I just wanted to tell you two quick things that to understand and just to complement what Jussara said, that we know from the Spiritist knowledge, and what Joanna brings, that of course, I didn't thought about that in that moment. I told you my experience. So everything that it was from the heart and from intuition, and we know the intuition comes from the self, from
Mhm.
our spirit. I just asked Joanna's help and Jesus' help and other, um, mentors and that were there to help me control, diminish my ego, so that the knowledge that it's from the self could, and myself, my spirit could connect to them, and so the will and my mother's also self could connect to them, and the will of the higher force should happen, and that it's connect to us. And we know that we know that we are born, and we know that we are going to die, and our ego doesn't know when or how, but our self knows.
Yes.
So what I wanted to say is that Joanna then explained to me when I got home after all the things. I just opened, because I like to randomly open one of Joanna's book, and it was there in her book about love. She tells us everything that I lived, but it's nice that I didn't read before, and I had already read that, but it was not my mind remember, it was my heart remembering her teachings. So because she said that it's a psychic radiation, and it's a when we are there with the person that we love, that we want to help, right? And this, she talks about the force of love as being a powerful force, that it's constituent, she says, of the elements of the cosmos. So we are part of the cosmos. Our spirit is part of the cosmos. Our body, that it's of course going to earth again, it's an element, the elements that we use here in the material life, the spirit uses, but it's all part of the big, of the source of this love, this power of love that we radiate with our psyche, and as Marcia said, and she said, with all our emotion, all the strength that we have in our psyche, like channel towards the person that we want to help. But as Jussara said, and since I have read so much, it was in my spirit already, this knowledge that I should do, bringing forth helping to bring the light, to calm my mom's ego about the fear, to trust, to help, diminish her ego, so that her spirit and my spirit could connect, and could, all the pain is gone, all the suffering is gone, and just connect to this beautiful light that comes from the Christ to all of us, with through different, like teachers, mentors, and different brothers and sisters from spirituality. And since Marsha talked about, and I told you guys that I have some Buddhist people and Joanna, in my family, and Joanna talks about that also. There's a beautiful book that is called Living Buddha, Living Christ. That's a Buddhist monk that wrote that. He is already deceased, but is Thich Nhat Hanh. I hope I have told in English his right
Take
name.
my hand.
And he,
Yeah.
yeah, that's it. Thank you, Jussara. And in one of the chapters of this book, he talks about real love never ends. So I'm will finish my contribution because he talks about Paul of Tarsus and the beautiful teaches when he teaches in Corinthians, right? And he says that Jesus gave his disciples the commandment to love God with all their being and to love their neighbors as themselves. And he says that all the teachings of Jesus was about love and understanding. And so that we can finish, he says, he quotes, as Marcia said, Paul of Tarsus, love is patient, love is kind, love is not envious, of that we have talked about. And then he says, love bears all things, as Paul said, believes all things, endures all things. That was the light that I was asking Jesus and Joanna to help me. Love has no limit, he says. Love never ends. Love is reborn and reborn and reborn. The love and care of the Christ is reborn in each one of us. Isn't that beautiful?
Oh, it is.
So let's remember in the moment of death, of our loved ones, that love is reborn. It never ends. And the wonderful light beings have been here so many times to remind us that, so that suffering can lessen, so that we can understand that suffering is not a curse. Suffering can be a blessing. And in my mom's passing, it was a blessing, that it was the way to connect not only both of us, but to connect us with the Christ and to give the example of everything that we have been talking about. Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Anahy. Thank you, Jussara. Thank you, who's here with us watching this episode. I want to just say, if this is the first time that you listen to our program, this program is a weekly talk, and they're all based on the works by Joanna de Angelis, and we hope that you are able to take some piece of consolation, of warmth, and understanding, and also to expand your own spirituality concepts. We want to take just a second to thank our sponsors, Mansão do Caminho, the United States Spiritist Federation, the International Spiritist Council, and AMI Brazil, the Brazilian arm of the Medical Spiritist Association. Thank you so much for being with us today, and we hope to see you next week. Bye bye, everyone.
you. Bye bye. Lots of love.